and I don't know if everybody's aware of this, but there's a 2% success rate with that. So I'm not a math guy, but you send out 100 resumes, and the likelihood is that 2 people will contact you, and they may contact you to say they're not interested. Those count. So it's an extremely, extremely inefficient process. And I just was seeing so much frustration on LinkedIn that I thought about it, and I thought, well, you know what? I'll throw a workbook together and keep it simple, like 10 pages, and think of all the things that I think people could do instead of that. And one of the things that I also wanted to clarify, well, let me finish that thought. Now what I'm doing here is I'm turning that workbook into a series of videos so that people that are more interested in consuming information and help on video can have access to this information if they prefer that to the workbook. So I want to emphasize one thing, and that is that this frustration, this lack of success in seeking out your next gig, it's not your fault. It is. So I've been watching and participating in the hiring process for 35 years. A lot of different economies, a lot of different technological innovation, a ton of that, different presidents, different circumstances. And my opinion is that the system has been broken since I first entered the game back in 1987. And it's broken for a number of reasons, and maybe it'd be helpful to understand why so that you're not blaming yourself and thinking that it might be your fault. There are too many people in the process, right? I've done work with companies that have 7, 8, 9, 10 people in the process, which I think is ludicrous. The people that are in the process are not all invested in the goal of finding the best candidate. They're in, like, some of the people in the process are their goal is to get as many resumes into the hiring manager's inbox as possible. Coordinating things. They're not in the process. They don't belong in the process. But the other thing about it is people that are in that process, they like the control that gives them. They like the power that gives them. They like the authority. They like being involved. And if those are your motivations, you're going to slow things down. You just are, because you're more about the process than you are about the result. And so, on the inside, you probably all have been on interviews before that fit this bill. They want me back for the fifth interview. Like, what is that all about? I don't even know. So those are some of the things behind the rationale of, building this workbook and then turning the workbook into videos. It's why I wrote the presentation, because I just see so much frustration on LinkedIn, but nobody seems to be doing anything about it. Everyone is kind of accepting that that's the only way to go about looking for work, and it's not. So part of the frustration that I can only assume, and it isn't even really an assumption because I've heard it from so many different people, is I don't have any control over this. Everything is outside of my control. There's nothing I can do about this. And that's, if you've experienced that feeling, and I guess we all have in life, it's a horrible feeling, because, the old adage is that you focus on what you can control and don't worry about what you can't control. But you have to identify what you can control. And in the interview process, you can control your preparation, and you can control a few other things, which I've been sharing in this series. But when you're looking for work, you're already in a position of perhaps desperation, perhaps a little bit of shame, anxiety, fear. Very few people enter into that interview process, all collected and optimistic and hopeful. Eventually you get there, but for quite some time, there's quite a bit of frustration. So I'm really interested in giving you back a sense of control. I think that'll bring you a sense of confidence, a purpose. You'll be more hopeful, and that's a better place to be. So again, what do I mean by let everyone know? I guess some people call it networking. Some people call it gathering referrals. It's both. It's basically getting out there and contacting people, and that concept is simple. So, but how do you do that, right? Who do you call? Who do you reach out to? And what do you say? So I want to get into that just a little bit. Um, it's been my experience in life, and specifically also inside recruiting, because I ask people for help all the time and I reach out to give people help all the time. My experience has been that most people like to help. Um, the problem that I see, and I see this on LinkedIn as well, is they don't know how to ask for help. And I think and some people just won't ask for help, you know. So I wanted to tell you just a little story. I see this on LinkedIn all the time, the way people are asking for help. And in summary, it's really they're not being specific enough. Like, what do you need help with? I'd love to help you, but you haven't told me what you need help with. So a lack of detail. I was recruiting, I don't know, 20 years ago in what they call the SAP space. It's an acronym for a piece of software developed came out of Siemens originally and then became its own entity many, many years ago. And it's a huge enterprise-wide package. So the people that work on it are paid very handsomely. Success and failure are millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, and the reach is across gigantic enterprises with offices all over the world to some extent. My point there is these people, this guy that I'm referring to, talking to, asking for help, bright guy, experienced guy, made good money, just a one percenter. And so I got to know him a little bit. We both went to Notre Dame, so we had that in common, and there's some power there. There's some credibility there from one alum to another. But I didn't know him that well. He was a nice guy, and we had at the tail end of our third conversation. I didn't have anything for him at the time, but we were going to stay in touch because we liked each other and respected each other. And so I started to think, well, I'm not going to let him go until I ask him for some referrals. And this is how I asked him for referrals. I gave him specific instructions, and I said, Jim, I want a favor of you. Would you be interested in helping me if you could? He said, of course. And I said, I'd like you to sit down and give some thought to making up a list. I don't know how many people would be on the list, maybe 10, maybe 20. I don't know, maybe 6, just whoever you can come up with, who you've worked with in the SAP space in the past that you would want on your team if we put a team together. And then I want you to break that list down into 2 kind of rows. One row has the people there that I can use your name because you know them well, and you know that they would be comfortable getting a call from someone that Jim said should call. And then the other list, I want the people where you don't want me to use their name, and I will call them anonymously and let them know that I can't reveal the source of the referral because he asked me to keep his name in confidence. So I want to talk to both groups of people. And I need people that are maybe 5 years of experience to about 10, maybe 12 years of experience, maybe making an hourly wage of somewhere in the area of $100 an hour. And they can be anywhere in the country, but I don't want really anybody that's overseas because I don't play overseas. And I said, that's something, if you could put together by maybe Friday morning, I can get to work on it next week. And then, that'll be great. I came in the next morning and I had a list of 17 names with phone numbers, email addresses, and descriptions about why they were good and what they were good at, and a little bit about their personalities. I mean, in the recruiting world, that's a gold mine. But I want you to take away from that is the specificity with which I asked for help and the presumptive tone. I just expected that he would help me. I wasn't obnoxious about it. I wasn't presumptuous, might be too strong a word, but I took an assumptive stance that he would help me. And that comes off. That gets people to do things that they might not otherwise do. But the specificity of the ask is what I want you to take away from that. The other thing about this letting everyone know that I want to share with you is, also in my experience, everybody knows somebody who knows somebody, right? I see a lot of people, and I coach a lot of people, when they start asking for, when I start asking for referrals, they're limiting me to their network of, a circle of 5 people. And I can't tell you in 35 years how many people that I've done this with, but it's probably in the hundreds. And what I mean by everybody knows somebody who knows somebody is you don't, if you're looking for IT people, for instance, technology people, but you could salespeople, manufacturing people, medical professionals, whatever, it doesn't matter. You don't limit the ask to people in that domain. And that's a mistake everyone makes. I can't tell you how many times, and maybe some of you that are listening know somebody like this, but I know people, I'm talking cousins, friends, neighbors, aunts, uncles, people that you go to for service, the car repair guy, doctors. I mean, in conversation with these people, you should ask them once if you go back to another episode or two, you talk about developing your story. Once you have your story down and you have some direction and a strategic plan, and it's time to start reaching out to let people know, to let everyone know, you can reach out to people that aren't in the domain in which you're looking for an opportunity, because people have neighbors that are in that domain. People have relatives that are in that domain. So in regard to this particular piece, I want you to, when you're ready to do this, and if you want to talk to me about any of this, you know how to reach me. I'll share that information at the end. But I want you to consider kind of dropping a pebble into a lake or a pond, and think of that first, second, third, fourth, fifth ring as that ripple expands. And I want you to go out like 5 levels. There's a silly little game that people have been playing for years called 6 Degrees of Separation from Kevin Bacon, and the point of the exercise is if you take Kevin Bacon, who everyone probably knows, a very famous and good actor in my opinion, and you go out one layer into his non-Hollywood circle, and then you go out another layer and another and another. By the time you get to that 6th step, that's a person that you're going to know. And if you want to try that game with a friend, give it a shot, because I've done it before. It's been a long time, but it works almost every time. And if you can just think about that, I think with the right level of specificity in terms of how you ask, and spreading your wings, because everybody knows somebody who knows somebody, I think that'll improve your chances of getting in front of people that are making the decisions. And then the next point, the next to last point is, don't limit yourself. I was at a coffee shop yesterday coaching a young man. I think he was 24, 25 years old. And one of the things we talked about is he was telling me, because he wasn't in IT, I was helping him because he was a son of a friend of mine. And I didn't really understand his world. It was operations in sports. I understand sports, but not the back end, not the operational component of sports. And he was describing to me a pathway to the eventual position years from now of athletic director at a Division I college. And it struck me that he was presuming that the pathway that he had seen a couple people take was the only pathway that he could take. And I think this is germane to all these episodes. There's a set of rules out there, right? There's a process, and people will tell you all the time, people in positions of authority, you have to do this, then you have to do that, then you have to do this. That's the way to get from here to there. It's not the only way. It never is. And as a matter of fact, when you create your own path and get creative and give yourself permission to think outside the proverbial box and do things that maybe are a little bold, that's how you get a good job. So if someone's telling you that you have to limit yourself to these steps, and I was watching his reaction to it, his eyes just lit up. He's like, I never even thought about that. I'm like, give yourself permission to think outside of the limits that other people are putting on your search, how you search, the steps in the search, whatever, And if someone tells you can't speak directly to the decision maker, I would say don't listen to that person. Don't let people put limits on what you can do and how you can do it. So now you've got a level of preparedness, particularly if you've listened to episodes 1 through 6 and now are here for number 7. I think that you're ready. And I would take all of the suggestions that I've made, and I would sit down and give some thought to creating a list of these people that you're going to reach out to, because some of them might be in your Gmail, some of them might be in LinkedIn, some of them might just be in your cell phone. Put them all in the same place, and then maybe reorganize them in a prioritized way. Like, if I can get this person on the phone, they're going to be very, very helpful, right? And the last person on the list might be helpful, but they belong on the list, but not in the top 10, and then beat that list up a little bit, and then, do some breath work and start reaching out. And if you can call someone, that's ideal. Meeting someone face to face is number one. Calling them is number two. Emailing them would be number three. And then some other social online outreach would be number four for me. But that's, that is it's a really good thing to do to spread your wings when it's time to start networking. And most people put way too many limits on how they do it and who they reach out to. So I just popped up one question. How long is a good amount of time to follow up on an interview? Yeah. Presuming you got one, that's a good question. There's really not an answer to that, but there is. It's not after the fact. And let me explain that, because I spent a lot of time preparing people for interviews, and this is a question that comes up all the time. When you're in an interview, at the very end of the interview, if you like what you've heard, if you're interested in potentially taking the next step or going to work for these people or getting an offer, whatever the next step is, then setting the tone of the follow-up expectation is your responsibility. And what I mean by that is something to the effect of this. I really enjoyed my time spent here with you. I really appreciate you taking the time to be available to me and explain to me how everything works here. I really think I could bring a lot to your group, to your culture, to your environment, and I would love to come to work for you. And I don't say that presumptuously, because I don't presume that you want me to come to work for you. I just wanted you to know how I felt. It's sincerely something I'd love to do, and I think I could bring a lot to the table. Next steps wise, would that be a phone call, or would there be another step in the interview process? I'm not certain. Listen for a response. You might not get one. They might not say, I don't know right now. We're just interviewing a lot of people, and we'll get to you as quick as possible. Well, I know you're very busy, and let me take some of that burden off your plate. How about this? If I don't hear from you by next Tuesday at, say, 3:00 in the afternoon, I'll give you a call. How's that sound? So if you do that, and it takes a little practice, because it's a little bit aggressive is not the right word. It's a little bit extroverted, but it works like a charm, because what you're also doing is taking off that person's desk a task. They don't have to call you back. You're going to call them, right? So it's more likely that you'll be followed up with. But if you don't do that, and I've had hundreds of people that I tell to do it and they don't do it, you'll be calling me asking me, have you heard anything? Have you heard anything? Have you heard anything? And I'm like, dude, you didn't ask the question. You didn't set the expectation. So it really is on you. If you learn how to handle that well, what's the next step? And if I don't hear from you by such and such a day and time, I'll call you. And then you get commitment. And then you might even take it further and say, I'll send you a calendar invitation for 3:15 on Tuesday. And so you don't have to worry about this at all. How's that work? And you're being, you're being confident. You're being, decisive. So anyway, I could talk about that topic, as you can probably tell, for hours on end. But hopefully that helps. Next one here. Oh, what about those networking meetings? There are quite a few in my city. Yeah, I have mixed emotions about these. I think that my immediate reaction and my experience has been they're not very effective. But the ones that are for people that do what I do are like job fairs. So maybe that's not the kind of network meeting that you're talking about. If you're new to a city, those are probably a good idea to get to know people, to start shaking some hands and get your name out there. So I guess it's kind of a circumstantial answer. I have a bias against them, the networking meetings. I feel like they're staged and people are glad handing each other, and not a lot of real relationships are being built. But I'll throw it out there. I could be accused of just being a skeptic about that. My personal opinion is I don't go to any of those, and I never really like going to them, but I don't want to suggest to you that you shouldn't. So I hope I answered your question. I hope that wasn't evasive. Last one is, would you accept the first offer or do you negotiate? If yes, what tips do you have to do so? Yeah, that's a great question. They get nervous talking about money. Um, I would go back further in the process than accepting the first offer. And when I used to negotiate, I would negotiate on behalf of someone else. So that's a little different than negotiating yourself. As a general rule, I would suggest that you negotiate the first offer, that you not accept the first offer. Although I would have to say it depends on the circumstances, because there's not much of a risk of losing the first offer if you ask for more than the first offer, but it is possible. So if you really need the job and you don't have any other options, you might want to reconsider and just accept that first offer. The other question I would have is, how good a job did you do about defining your compensation requirements when the topic initially came up? What was that conversation like? So no, I wouldn't take the first offer in the vast majority of the cases, but it does depend on your circumstances personally and your level of, I hate the word, but desperation. You would hate to lose an opportunity if you were in that position. But I'd be happy to get into much more detail with you if you wanted to kind of hop on my calendar, which is the next step for people. Some of these topics are deep and broad and nuanced. And so I think that's probably acceptable as an answer for now, but there's a lot more I could tell you about that conversation, how to talk about money. So that's the questions for now. I hope all that stuff was very helpful. In terms of getting in touch with me, it is simple. If you go to my website, and my name's right there on the screen, it's markaylward.com, and above the fold on the first page is access to my calendar. And I give out 30 minutes of free advice, a getting to know you call. And on that call, I'll ask you a series of questions about your circumstances and what you do, and we'll figure out what the challenges are that you're bumping into. And then I'll tell you if I can help you. And then I'll tell you, if I can, how I can help you. And then I typically sign people up for an hour at a time, and I do some discounts on packages of hours. But you'll get a couple of points from me on that free call that you'll be able to take action on. So it's a win-win. And if you want to dive into any of these topics, that might be a good way to go about doing it. So this was episode number 7. We've got one more. Episode number 8 will be next Tuesday at 3 p.m. And tell your friends, man. There's a lot of people out there looking for work that could use this information. So spread the word as aggressively as you're comfortable, and enjoy the rest of your day. See you.